Entering the Pat Mayo Experience.
Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by DraftKings. Week 6 DraftKings Picks. Break down the cheap plays, the best stacks, the defenses that you need. Reminder to play in the best tournament on DraftKings. 1,000 spots remain in the Pat Mayo Experience Listeners League. Link down in the description. Let's fill that up. We're not making it any bigger by having 1,000 spots remaining on Friday. I mean, at least before, there'd be like 100 spots left by Friday. But 1,000, probably going to make it smaller unless we can fill that up pretty quickly, all right? Smash like for the episode, rate and review the podcast, sub to Mayo Media Network on YouTube, and if you want the lineup builder, the customizable lineup builder, and all of the stats and tools that go along with it, runthesims.com/Mayo will get you 10% off any membership level, as will some code at runpuresports.com.
RPS heater 25.
Still on a heater.
Yes, still on the heater. It's working.
People are... Is it 25%?
Yeah, 25% off the first month.
There you go.
Yeah, it's good. Everyone's been getting in. Now NBA's coming back.
Riding trains.
Yeah, the trains are working. The Duke bros are not happy, but we're working out well with it, so we'll take it.
It's funny. I was just randomly scrolling on Reddit yesterday, and I this has really nothing to do with the Duke train, but like the crypto bros. It was just like, hey, crypto bros, McDonald's paying minimum wage. It was a McDonald's ad billboard that was taken out.
Oh my gosh.
Just firing shots.
Taking shots these days. No one's safe, Pat.
No. Josh Allen's pretty safe.
He was last week, and we'll see about this week again. But yeah, I look back. You and I usually do the play the best plays. I go through my same format that we do for the show. I bring in my spreadsheet all ready to go. Be prepared. I'm like, oh, the top guy at everything, Dallas D. Higbee's the top of the chart there. I've got, who did I have at wide receiver? Diggs, Davis, Shakir, question mark. We were waiting on the McKenzie news last week, and we got it. And then you have, the running backs, Stevenson, Herbert. Basically, you just plugged all that together, and you had the winning Millie Maker lineup. So I missed it.
This week is a little bit different. Let's just see. Well, let's see what the optimal is telling us right now. A lot of Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah.
Who Run the Sims has projected right now as early ownership projections, but like 38% ownership, and only appears in the optimal lineup around 20% of the time, thus making him the biggest negative leverage on the slate. That doesn't mean are you going to play him, do you think?
I will in some, yeah, for sure. Especially, again, for me, it's like last week with the Tom Brady stacks. I talked on here. I was pretty happy with that. Worked out for me in a couple tournaments, but playing in the higher dollar, smaller stakes, you could still get away with it. I just don't want to do it in the large field because there's so much opportunity for it to bust. I'll throw it into my hand build $20. If I throw it in, I always put it in the $20 or something. But when I build out my MME set, probably not going to go there just based on if we haven't had it this year yet where someone's 38% projected going in. I think Barkley's week was the highest, and he ended up coming in at 40%. Ramondre could just be he could be 50% by the time we get to Sunday.
Well, there's three running backs that kind of leap off. It's him, Benjamin, and Ken Walker.
Yeah.
Some combination of those two might end up being in half the lineups.
Yeah.
Do you need those guys, though?
I think this is the thing, right? The slate is set up so that there's the two games that people want to go after. They both happen to be the afternoon games. To wait and see. I didn't see the result of the baseball game last night. I actually heard that if the Seattle Astros game, the Mariners Astros, I should say it better, to go into Sunday, I think they're going to push back the Seattle-Arizona game and even further time
by
slot.
like an hour, yeah.
Yeah, it's not by much, but for like late swap and things like that and to keep after, I think it's still important for the slate. But those two games with Buffalo, Kansas City, Seattle, Arizona, that's why. And when you've got Ken Walker, Benjamin, both in that same game at cheaper price tags, also you have Marquise Brown's expensive, but Rondale Moore, and then we'll see Lockett left practice yesterday. Should play though. His price went down somehow to 50, or it stayed the same, I guess, 5,600. But for what he did, that seems crazy. So I think those as secondary stacks will be pretty popular just because they're cheap to fit in with the Buffalo, Kansas City game stacks or 3-1s or whatever we see people run out there.
Do you think that people will late swap if they miss out on the early people are stacking up both those games, and especially if the other one gets pushed another hour, still a part of this main slate, but if Minnesota-Miami goes off, and now all of a sudden people in the Millie Maker are chasing down like some outrageous result from earlier, you're going to have to get off all this stuff, aren't you?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about a little bit earlier. If you're probably going to have your lineups already set up for that afternoon spot, but depending on what happens in the morning, and I've got a couple spots that I think we can attack in the morning that I'll be happy to go there, versus I think most will have it set up, Pat, where they've got the morning running backs, like you talk about with some of the guys that are popular. And, if that hits, now what do I do? Because now you got the same setup for the afternoon as everybody else anyway. So it does make it a little bit unique to this slate. But we also have a situation here. It's a first week of buys, right? So all that stuff, back to the Ramondre factor at 38% projection right now, some of that is to do with people just don't have as many places to go as what we've had in weeks previous.
I think there's some decent options here,
Oh, yeah.
especially at the higher end and then the lower end of receiver, if that's the way that you wanted to go. But yeah, Ramondre, Eno Benjamin, then Ken Walker, the three, I want to say like stone cold lock, chalk running backs, but they're going to be pretty popular. The optimizer also likes Brady.
Yeah.
So try to figure out how to get Brady with Godwin, with Evans. It looks like Cameron Brate is going to play, so you can't just plug in Cade Otto this time around.
Yeah, that was
but that's a really good spot that it's not going to be unpopular. But I think that people are overlooking that because just people don't know what to do with the Pittsburgh side of things. Just maybe don't.
Same as, look, last week, you don't have to go to the other side. I know there was, scenarios with the Buffalo stacks.
I had Pickens as a part of my
Pickens worked, and the winning Millie Maker lineup actually used 3 Tampa Bay guys with no Brady. It had Fournette, Godwin, and I believe Otton was in there as well. And the point being, anyway, was that you could have actually taken Godwin to Pickens for the classic run back, and Otton goes up to Njoku as just another random tight end play. And it actually still would have scored more and looked more like a conventional build, quote unquote conventional build. So it's like you can run these spots back if you think like Pickens is fine again if you want. I'm just saying you don't have to your point. And then the interesting part is, do you actually think it just shows popular in people talking about it with the Brady stacks? Or do you think they actually go there because when he essentially failed last week, even though he didn't fail, it just wasn't enough to do anything for you on the slate. So do you think people actually go back to these full Brady stacks after what happened last week?
I don't know. I think that people are going to look for any excuse. Like they're going to play their Seattle stacks or Arizona game stacks.
Yeah.
Then obviously the Bills-Chiefs stack is going to come in. Yeah. Those are going to be the two most popular. I can't envision a world where the Brady stack isn't the next one.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. I was just saying I think there's at least 3 in front of it because you've got both the guys in that Buffalo-Kansas City game, and then you've got Geno Smith, who's a talking point in its own right at, I think he's 5,700 on the slate. Very easy to stack up. Talk about Lockett not getting a price change. Talk about those Arizona guys on the other side. You got Eno Benjamin, 4,600. Rondale Moore, 4,200. So I can easily see where people would go to those guys as well.
Yeah, the optimal rates on the players right now, Allen, Brady, and Geno are all inside the top 4. In terms of running the slate 10,000 times, those three of those 4 quarterbacks end up inside the top 4. The other guy is Kirk Cousins.
Oh, yeah, I like it. I have him start up here. That's what I wanted to talk about, one of the early spots. I mean, if you look to Jefferson, we know what he can do. He's expensive. He's 8,900, but that's what he should be. For a guy that can rack up 100 yards in the first quarter or first half even, if you want to put it a little bit further, it's very possible. This is a good spot. Both these defenses, these secondaries, I should say, are susceptible to taking some big hits in these guys that we've got. Tyreek, Waddle. Again, Miami, what sucks is it looks like Teddy's back at practice, but only going to be the number 2 this week.
Then play Mostert, who is back at practice saying he's going to play. Like Minnesota can't stop anyone on the ground.
Or just, I'm fine with still playing them, but I'm saying instead of stacking up, that's why I like the Cousins side, because the Cousins side, I know where to go. And then the other side, I can still get my run back and just hope they do enough. What if Tyreek gets an end around for 80 yards or something to the house? Like you could see other stuff, and I think they're still capable of getting him the ball. It's just what he does with it, and that's the upside that you get there. So I actually like that stack for early on. And then what about the Lamar Jackson setup here? Because Andrew's $800 cheaper than Kelsey, so you're getting different there, where a lot of people are going to be able to fit Kelsey with those values we talked about and wanting to be in that game. The problem is if you're looking for a run back, it sucks to find one. But
it's Barkley.
Yeah, Barkley's there, but the Giants have those cheap receivers. You're playing roulette with them because it's really sad what they've got going on their wide receiver side of the board.
Yeah, I've actually been, I wouldn't say making myself money this year, but not costing myself a bunch of money, but just by not playing the Richie Jameses of the world. It's like, right. Oh, Richie James, great spots. Like, he's not good.
Yeah.
This offense isn't good.
Here's the problem.
If this offense is going to be good, Saquon's going to touch the ball 40 times.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? And it's such a a thing that people look at because it's always cheap. I can make it work if this, if that. It's not NBA DFS. It's not like he's getting the usage and the minutes and he's subbing in for somebody else, so you're guaranteed to at least have a chance to get something on the floor. On the field, you might get nothing out of them, and like say, see guys last night. Look at that horrible Thursday night football game. Just so many drops. Curtis Samuel, stone hands. Mooney at the end tried to make it happen, but if you just caught it, that's the game-winning touchdown. Like there's so many things. These guys, even when they get the opportunities, it's not guaranteed that they're going to come through.
So you like Minnesota as a non-main stack.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of who else to stack up. Burrow just keeps leaping off the page to me.
Yeah, he's another one I got.
No one's going to use Burrow. because they don't believe in him. Me included. I don't believe in him right now. He's been terrible. But it's a nice spot. He's too expensive versus like he's $700 more than Kirk Cousins. Like there's just not a world where people look at it and be like, Joe Burrow is my quarterback this week.
Right.
But he's still, especially if T. Higgins is out, you can do Hayden Hurst and Jamar Chase along with him. Mixon will still continue to be popular because of the volume he gets. I'm good with shucking him aside. And Olave might be back this week too. Probably no Michael Thomas on the other side, or whatever the hell you want to do with the Saints. If you don't want to use any Saints, sure. Yeah. But one of these games are going to score like 50 points.
I personally still like Kamara, especially if Thomas is out, because look at last game. I know Taysom, what did he do? 4 touchdowns himself, and Kamara still hits 26 DraftKings points. Like the price, again, they didn't change any pricing. Like he's still I think he's $100 more than last week. They're in the dome, inside. Burrow, like you said, in that weird range. Again, there is some negativity towards him too, and the team in general. But I think where a lot of it stems from, Pat, and you mentioned him, is from Jamar Chase. People are down on this guy right now. Back to last time people were this down on Jamar Chase was last season, preseason. He can't catch any balls. He's got a case of the drops. Then what happened? He came into the season and absolutely dominated. So I actually like that spot. I had Cousins, Burrow, and Jackson as the 3 guys there outside of Allen and Mahomes as the 2 hammer spots at home, in the big game in the afternoon. Those 3 spots. But the Burrow one, like I said, easy to stack up. We'll wait and see on the Higgins news. But I think that's a good spot that you can go to as well.
The other one I was looking at was Stafford. Carolina, second last in the league at generating pressure. Mm-hmm. And all the problems that the Rams have had so far this year is they can't keep Matthew Stafford upright. Now, it's going to be super expensive if you do Kupp and Higbee along with him. And I have no clue who you play on the other side of the ball, if anything, from the Carolina side with P.J. Walker coming back.
The resurgence of DJ Moore with the new quarterback, maybe.
This feels like an ultimate get-right spot for the Rams.
Yeah.
And again, everyone's just off. Everyone's off the Bengals. Everyone's off the Rams for justifiable reasons, but we're trying to find a different path that doesn't involve Geno, Allen, or Mahomes. Or maybe we say, screw it. I'm going to play 3 main stacks, and those are the 3 main stacks.
It feels like a week for that, but I never do that. So that's why I'm fine with getting a little bit less of the afternoon spot with the 54-point total. And I'll talk when we go to running back. I think there's a good play in that game, actually. That's pretty sneaky. But just to go to those guys you mentioned, that's kind of, I had Stafford on the maybes. It's like you said, it's easy to stack up because you're putting him with Kupp and Higbee, just racking up whatever you can. And then if you want to put somebody on their side, it's expensive if you play CMC. So it would probably have to be DJ Moore, or just don't run it back. And like you said, if it's a get right spot, maybe they just pound them completely. Don't forget, I'm not saying to pack in the defense here because it's 4,100, but they are they're 4,100 for a reason. This looks like a spot that the Rams smash. They're 10.5-point favorites at home. This could be your spot from last week where you just stack it up, leave the other side alone, and because no one's on it, and these are great plays that can rack up PPR points, you can just fill in the values, and you're different because you don't have that. And one that I want to go to, I'll go to it now because I hinted at it a second ago, but you know who's $100 less than Ramondre Stevenson? It was a big narrative last week about you can't play this guy in blowouts. You can only play him in close games. I think Buffalo and Kansas City should be a pretty close game. $5,900, Mr. Devin Singletary could get back in the mix. And if you're already going off Josh Allen or Mahomes and you're saying, I'm not playing that stack, which could punish you completely, you might as well get a piece of that action. And he's $100 less than Ramondre, Devin Singletary, in what should be a close game where his stats bear out. It was the narrative last week was the opposite. Why not hop back on it in this spot? And if you played one of these stacks we talked about that aren't Josh Allen or Mahomes, you can plug him into your stack and even get a run back with MVS or something like Hardman and take a shot that way and get pieces of that game.
I don't mind that. And it's not going to cost you a ton. It's only $5,900. It gives you that piece. It gives you probably the least popular piece of that Bills offense of reasonable players.
Yeah.
Like, is McKenzie going to be back? Do we know that?
Out of concussion protocol. Again, I think he has to still get fully cleared, but it looks like he's going to be cleared from everything that I've seen.
Right, so Shakira is shaking his ass back to the sidelines. Can't use him again?
Yeah.
Great. So Ramondre, $6,000. Singletary, and then you also have Breece Hall at $5,800 against the league's worst run defense. I think that Breece Hall should garner some attention here. They're just taking even more away from Singletary. Yeah. Like he's in that ultimate, the Rick Gaiman squeeze spot.
Yeah.
Where he has just the 2 chalk plays, one above, one below. How can people actually go to him?
That's the best part. I think I've got him on the list as well for that same reason. And you nailed it, because that's the point, is when people look at it, they know they're saying he's going to be popular again, and he should be, because look how good he did last week. He finally took the reins, what we expected, everything played out the way we hoped. But now they can't actually go there because they're going other places, and the numbers just say it. And this is my point earlier when I talked about it being the bye weeks now. Everything gets even more condensed, right? Because everyone's been talking over the last few weeks how the ownership's been spaced out a little bit more. And, you didn't actually see it. Last week, for example, James Robinson ended up getting to the highest owned running back at 25%. After that, it was like 19, 17, 16, and then everybody was 15 or less. You won't get those spots when these bye weeks pop up because everyone just becomes the best play and you'll get more condensed ownership on a guy like Stevenson. So I love the squeeze spots.
The other one I was looking at, and I don't know how to use the game. Obviously, Stevenson's going to have to be a part of that. But Browns-Patriots screams like a game where there's going to be points.
Oh, man, I hope you're right. He's my only other guy on the maybe list, and it's not the side you think probably, but...
Is it Amari Cooper?
Here's the thing. When I keep looking at my numbers and what I'm seeing is Amari obviously looks really good, but, what does Belichick do? He usually tries to squeeze out the number one guy. I don't know if he can.
Yeah, he can squeeze out the number one guy, Nick Chubb, that they're going to have to dedicate they have a bad run defense anyway.
Yeah.
The issue is, if you leave... the Patriots' pass D has actually been quite good, especially in man-to-man. So... that would be my one hesitation, but I feel like they have to sell out to stop Chubb.
That's what I was thinking. So I'm saying if that's the case, you've got Amari, DPJ, who's actually been racking it up. So I think he at a cheaper price tag. We like Njoku. Boom, you're done. What else do you need there? This is what we talk about with an easier stack.
Bring it back with Jacoby Myers.
Or if you wanted to stack on to the chalk, how can you use Stevenson in a way others aren't? It would be to get involved in the same game. Hope he moves the needle on that game and forces Cleveland to have to throw. So, again, I don't love going there, and I'm not going to do it a bunch. I just think if you're trying to take shots at something else, at least make it make sense. And in this case, we have a very condensed Cleveland offense. The thought that Belichick would stop Chubb and the run, and then the run backs are pretty simple. One of them is the chalk of the slate. So why not fit him into the mix if you're going to do that? Or go Myers, like you said, to leverage it completely.
I played Myers last week. I
like Myers. He looks fine.
The moment they said he was active, I was like, I'm in. This is the ultimate Bailey Zappi pass.
And what did he have? 20-something? 18-something?
He almost had 30 points.
Yeah, that might have been before. He's had another big game that was almost 20. Yeah. And I think last week was almost 30, and that's what I'm saying.
He runs easy routes, and they're not trying to throw into double coverage with Bailey Zappi. They're trying to throw to that guy who's open 6 feet in front of him. Which is what those are the routes Jacoby Myers runs. He's not running nines down the field. He's running little slants right by the line of scrimmage. Very simple completions, and he's got a bit of yak after him. That's what he did last week. Just made one guy miss, and then all of a sudden he was gone.
Yeah, and if you want to do something a little bit different, because you can't get... Brissett is pretty gross, and going to that game is... I get it, but...
They have a top 10 pass. It was like the week that I didn't use Geno. I used Goff instead. But, still the narrative even that week around Seattle's offense was Geno sucks. You can't use Geno. It's he's okay. Brissett has been okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm saying for people out there that are I can't do it. I just can't do it. You could go, we're talking about, Amari looks very good and is cheap, $5,900. Myers, we just talked it up, is one of the best leverage plays on the slate based on Stevenson's ownership. You can just run that secondary stack, especially if you're involving the Buffalo-Kansas City game. What if you just had Singletary and Kelsey? You've already got 2 cheap wide receivers. Most people are running Stevenson and Amari Cooper. When you run, okay, I'll go Cooper with you, but I'm going to take something different from that other game that eats into his... if Myers is scoring and crushing, it should be taking away from what Stevenson's doing. So, again, both could get there, but the point being, I don't hate that from a secondary stack perspective.
Based on all these, 3 cheaper, chalky running backs, the top end of running back is just getting no love. Mm-hmm. Nick Chubb, 7% projected ownership. McCaffrey, 7% projected ownership. Jonathan Taylor, expected to play, it looks like, 10%. Barkley's only 16%. Not to say that's a great matchup against Baltimore, but when you touch the ball that often, you're going to score fantasy points, and it only takes one miss, and then Barkley's gone. So that's always, it's like the Nick Chubb thing. He had 24 carries, 23 of them were terrible. That's not the case so much this year, but the other one was for 89 yards and a touchdown. The Derrick Henry thing at the same time. Delvin Cook, I know you like that game from the passing end.
Yep.
And then you still have Fournette. Fournette, even at 13, still seems pretty low for Leonard Fournette. When it's not working for him, it's let's pass it to him 9 times.
Yeah, I like that. I had some of those guys top. Kamara being the one that I like the most, but he's probably more popular than those other ones that you mentioned.
He's about the same as Fournette.
Yeah, I was going to say, but Barkley, Fournette came afterwards that I've got on my list, and then going down, like I said, Cook, CMC, Taylor sort of fit down towards the bottom a little bit, but mainly because the stacks that you're setting up, even if you are going like the Burrows, the Lamars, the Bradys, it still leans away from that. So again, like you said, it's a way to flip things in tournaments just to get different. But when you're staying mid-tier to high-end quarterback and their options with them, that's when it becomes a little bit more of a challenge to fit these guys in.
Worst rushing defense on this slate right now. Cleveland is the worst. Green Bay is second worst. New England is third worst. That Cleveland, that's what I'm saying. Like, this Cleveland-New England game, neither of these teams really play defense.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. And it's just not the perception. Atlanta is also in there. Like, the San Francisco-Atlanta game, it just feels like people have gloves on. They're like, I want nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
And I get it, because you have no idea what Atlanta offense is going to show up. Like the week that we tried to stack up Mariota, Drake, London, and Pitts, and they threw the ball 7 times. And they were like, oh, no, because we can run for 275 yards. Not that I want any of the Atlanta running backs against the league's best rush defense, but the Niners' defense is absolutely banged up. Like, what about the Niners' offense? Debo, Jimmy, Ayuk. Like, you can pass all over. You can do anything to Atlanta you want to.
Yeah, Wilson got the price bump. I think he's 6,200 this week now, and that's fair, especially going up against Atlanta. Like
no
you
one's
talked
playing
about.
them.
No one, you can't. Like I said, we explain where everyone's going. Not enough. When we say you can't, what we mean is not enough people will go there, because it's like the Breece Hall situation. We know it's good. We know it's a good matchup. But again, we want to play all these other guys in these bigger, high total games. The Benjamins, the Walkers, all of that. But as far as the pass offense goes, I have a theory. I'm trying to think about the best way to use it for this spot and for this week. But Atlanta, I mean, you come from sports betting as well. You know this. They're a 5.5 home dog. It's usually like an auto bet when you have a 5.5 home dog. You also have the storyline with Atlanta covered against the spread every single game this season. You also have San Francisco coming from the West Coast over, on top of the fact that it's a look-ahead spot. Do you know who San Francisco plays next week? Kansas City Chiefs. That's a pretty big game. So, I mean, there is a potential here that Atlanta comes out ahead and covers another game. It doesn't mean they win the game. I'm just saying there's a spot here to use that. And I'm thinking, like, if San Francisco gets behind, Debo is pretty fair priced for the amount of usage he gets in that sort of mid-tier wide receiver range. You talked about Ayuk. You've got Kittle. If Kittle is better in closer games, right? That's what we've taken away from it, is when he doesn't have to block as much and all those factors, you could see him more in a closer game. So I don't know here, man. Like there is some guys that I actually have interest in. I just don't. Am I really stacking up Jimmy G with all these guys?
No.
And then what are you doing with Atlanta? Like I don't know. It's just tough. And we got to watch the injuries. You talked about like Bosa and those guys on the San Francisco side that we got to wait and see what's going on with them. If they play, makes it a little tougher to see, because San Francisco is so physical.
Yeah, I think they're going to be down like 6 of their defensive starters.
Yeah.
And they'll probably still win this game pretty comfortably. But will they cover the 5.5, I suppose, is what.
That's what I'm saying, where I think, like you said it there, maybe not comfortably to what you said, but if they win it, it might just be a closer game. But then you have to realize, how can I apply that to this spot?
There is one other spot, and I don't know how to wrap my mind around it, but now I'm looking at like the optimal percentage. Like, how often does this person appear in the optimal lineup when you run all the simulations? 7% of the time, Aaron Jones. 1% ownership against the Jets.
Yeah.
Like, that game, no one is just, it's like the San Francisco-Atlanta game. It's like, screw this.
I just
But
like
it's the Jets.
Yeah. I mean, he's like a wide receiver, right? So you can use him multiple ways. His price is fair. Nobody's on him. It is the Jets. We like Breece Hall, but again, it's not. I mean, that would be one of the spots where you actually could put running back against running back, because both are essential. Look at last week. Breece Hall almost had both bonuses. What was it, 97? I think he actually got the pass bonus, but he got 97 on the ground.
I think we need to temper expectations about him having an 80-yard catch every single week.
We're not going to
People
get
might
that.
try to cover him now.
No, we're saying more. What is he, 6? Like, he's in that squeeze range, like you talked about, and the price point being for him that he can get there both ways. But Aaron Jones can do the same. Aaron Jones can catch a touchdown and run and get it that way. So I don't hate it. I was looking at more like a mini stack in that game, like maybe Hall with Romeo Dobbs or something like that, where you have sort of a secondary stack set up. But I could definitely see what you're saying there as well. And like I said, no one's going to go there. That could be a spot to hit up.
Well, let's talk through the popular stacks then, because I don't want to come on here and be like, who you shouldn't play? Josh Allen.
Right.
How are we going to do this? Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think, is a very interesting piece from the Kansas City side, because he does appear like it's not easy what you're going to do on the Kansas City side if that's the side that you want. I just think it's really predictable what people are going to do on the Kansas City side. You got this guy Mahomes, you got this guy Kelsey, done.
And MVS crushed last week, so
probably him.
And he's cheap enough, so those three for sure.
And people like Juju for
that's
reasons unknown,
me.
but they like him.
Yeah. So someone said you should have known when his first name rhymes with poo-poo and juju. I was like, that it's kind of childish, but at the same time, it's kind of good when you think about that. Like, he has been so bad.
But you mentioned Singletary on the one side. Edwards-Helaire is 6,300. Like, legit, no one is using, even as a part of these stacks, no one is using it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that means you should use him with Josh Allen and just hope that he steals like 4 touchdowns in this game. Or do you just put him in with Mahomes and just be like, hey, I think they're going to score a ton of points, and this is a piece that no one has?
So far this season, it's worked. I mean, it's been on showdown slates when you've got to see it. 2 different showdown slates where we had Kansas City, and it was passing touchdowns to CEH because, on showdown slates, you're setting the rules. And what if I got Mahomes captain, what should I do? Do I include CEH? In the past, it hasn't really been that way. Well, now it has, so I definitely think you could do that. I also think there's, to your point, when you're building up for that game, well, first off, what do you think happens in this game? If you had to bet right now, what are you saying on this Buffalo-Kansas City game? What do you see?
Bills by 20.
Just so we're on the same page. Maybe that's bad, but I was gonna say I think Bills smash here. So I was actually looking at even. I know it's wild, but Jerick McKinnon. Every time I see him, he looks good.
Yeah, but he never actually does anything.
Got it for 30, just one play. They just didn't use him enough. But again, if they get in a spot where they have to and they're down more. But to your point, it could start off CEH, and we could just get one of those games where instead of Kelsey had 4 touchdowns with 7 catches for 25 yards. Come on, but. If he falls, he actually won me a King of the Beach seat, so I'll take it. But what I would say is don't see that happening again. We could see the Kelsey falls on the 2 type thing here, and we just have CEH banging in 3 touchdowns or something, and that sparks Allen to have to continue to go back and forth like we expect and to continue to rack up points. So Allen, blowout proof, doesn't matter. Unlikely to be a blowout anyway, so even better. But you know what I mean? He's pushed.
If it's a blowout, like last week, he already got there.
Yes.
Or if he has to catch up, great news.
Barring injury, he's this to me, he's the best. It doesn't matter, even with his ownership that's associated with. I'm not sure what it will show if it's still positive leverage or not. But
no, it actually shows him at negative leverage. It has him at where the hell did he go here? Josh Allen, 18% ownership, optimal rate 12%, highest of any quarterback.
Yeah.
But when ownership is higher than optimal rate, then it creates negative leverage.
Yeah, you got to go. It's got to be how you stack it up. But for example, that side, I think you could put Allen with Singletary. Too. You talked about Mahomes with CEH. I think you can put Allen with Singletary.
Do you see any possible way that if you're going to go to this game, that it's I will do Allen, Diggs, Gabe Davis, and bring it back with Kelsey? Or do you have to get a bit more creative than that?
Yes and no. Obviously that costs a lot of money.
Yeah,
so
but you
I don't even think,
let's try it.
Yeah.
Diggs.
I don't like it, not because I don't think you can make it fit. So go ahead, but I'm saying it's not that. It's that when you do that,
you're the same as everybody.
You have to get there the same way everybody else gets there. You just leave yourself, and it was you won't get duped. There's 9 spots. I'm not saying that. It's the same thing in golf. We talk about all the time. We do the golf show like this. Is that if you get 4 golfers the same as everybody else, you have a 2v2 to the top on Sunday, and it's a lot more luck that you're putting into it than if you actually build around this game differently. So go ahead.
Who would be the cheap defense we can throw in here?
Carolina versus LA. Cheapest D on the slate. And
yeah,
LA,
they're tied with the Steelers against Tampa.
Way more likely that Carolina gets to Stafford. Brady is not.
Yes.
Nobody's getting to them from Pittsburgh. They don't have Watt still. They don't have anybody.
I would say even Giants against Lamar. Just because
could work.
Just because they blitz so often.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe they end
I'm just saying what the slate's doing and what the sites are telling you. It's Carolina.
I mean, who's going to be the popular D? It's got to be Jacksonville, right?
Jacksonville, maybe against Matt Ryan.
If it's not Jacksonville, it should be Jacksonville. That's
How much are they right now? I forget.
$3,000.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think Carolina is getting pushed more than what we've seen so far. So,
all right, so let's just throw Carolina in here.
Yeah,
so
$2,400.
Allen, Diggs, Davis, Kelsey, all in the same lineup. We throw in Panthers D and Eno Benjamin
And Stevenson.
Yeah, we're running out of money here.
That's what I was saying.
We only have $4,000 left for a running back, wide receiver, and flex.
Yeah. I don't think people do this
So
as
is
much.
that too expensive to do?
I think people don't go there because of that, and you are forcing a lot. I think you pick between Davis and Diggs.
All right.
You can go take Davis down to, or take Diggs or Davis, whoever you choose, down to McKenzie, because once he's ruled in, people are going there. He's
okay,
cheap.
but
He's
but
5,000.
now what I'm saying is maybe people won't have these 4 together because it's too expensive.
Because it's bad, probably.
I mean, there's 4 pretty good players.
They are, but you need 9 to hit. That's where the mistake gets made.
I need the big 4.
This is the casual play. This is what we're trying to help people go
against.
against.
Yeah, but I don't know if it ends up being a casual play because I don't think you can afford it.
They can't, but I'm saying that if they try, that's what puts them where they're like, oh, I just snuck. I'm sweating a min cash. You have the 4 best plays, sure, but you don't have the rest to go with it. You force a lot at that point.
Trying to figure out if you could do it. How would you do it?
So
Donovan Peoples-Jones is 39. It's getting to the other running back that is the tough part.
Well, you got to go like you said. So
it would have to be like Ken Walker because
it's Eno Benjamin and Ken Walker in the same game, and just hope it's a 51-point total and it's all running backs.
So now you have a receiver and flex, and you only have $3,300 per player.
Yeah, you're gonna need someone cheap, man.
Who is the cheapest? I mean, is there a $2,500 tight end you can use as a flex?
Yeah, so see what I mean? That's why. So what you know is two things. One, people aren't doing this. Two, it's bad.
Yeah.
That's what you take away. That's the takeaway from this
If
exercise.
Freiermuth sits, you can use Zach Gentry.
Yeah.
At $2,600.
Gosh, Tampa might just punish this Pittsburgh team so bad. Like,
how high? I'm just looking at it right now. Like Mark Andrews, we'll talk about tight ends more here in a second. Mark Andrews only 13% ownership, which is crazy considering he's the best.
But it's $800 more to get to Kelsey in that game.
Sure, and Andrews has been better.
I like him better.
Outside of a 4 touchdown game, like every week, Andrews is just good.
Yeah.
But Hayden Hurst only 7% owned.
Like
that
him.
seems low, doesn't it?
Yeah.
For $3,300.
The main thing is the other guys just eat up all the ownership. So you can't, expect that much more out of them, but that's the whole point. That's why we like them, not just because their ownership's low, that more so that the spots that they're in, like we attach Hurst to Burrow, and what if Higgins is out? Even better. Like, you know what I mean? Some of these situations are good news based on the ownership. It could be great news because they actually fit in stacks that we have interest in playing. So that's why I like it from that perspective. But, I think at tight end, when you've got Zach Ertz in that spot, he's going to be very popular against Seattle. That's a note too, right? The Seattle spot against tight ends, who beat them up? Hawkinson beat him up?
I think that is a very particular case because...
Well, I was going to bring this up.
That Hawkinson beat them up, yes. They had no receivers and were missing their pass-catching running back. Like, he was their only regular receiver that they had.
Right, and it was the other one was New Orleans with Taysom Hill, who on FanDuel happened to be a tight end, but that doesn't mean he's a tight end. He did it from all different ways.
He was a running back.
He was a running back, so that's my point. People say, tight ends just smash them, but it's the two pretty specific scenarios where it happened. Now, they do still get beat up a little bit. Like we had, I think when Denver played them, Beck had a good game with them, and the other, I forget who else for Denver had a good game that week. They put up like 14 combined DraftKings points, but it's like you're not going to get crushed. And at 4,900 for Ertz, it's not like a lock to me, guaranteed that he goes. But I think Kenneth Walker, Ertz, even in secondary stacks, will be popular. Or Ertz, Lockett will be popular. And again, everyone's stacking up. The Seattle side is not interested in Disley or Fant, so it becomes Geno, Lockett, Ertz.
I could see playing Disley.
Yep, might be a way to go different in that spot.
Because he's cheap, right?
Yeah.
So
it's got some touchdowns too.
$3,100. You need him to have like 3 catches and a touchdown, and hopefully like 50 yards.
Run
as a part of the rest of the stack.
Disley, who's doing that? Nobody. And you're in the same game. You're just saying it flips. It does not look as good as Walker Ertz, of course. But
one of those games fails to get there. Obviously,
one of the games likely fails to get there, and a lot of spots within said games could still fail to get there, even if said games go off. So that's the whole point about it's all about how you set it up, not about just saying I'm going to stack this game every way. That's how you'd be able to get different scenarios in it. But that's it.
Josh Allen, Gabe Davis, McKenzie, Kelsey. Now we have 4,500 left. That's still not a lot. It's really just using like Allen and Kelsey together is tough.
Yeah. I definitely think people get to that. Maybe you see more single stacks like Josh Allen, Davis, McKenzie. Or sorry, Josh Allen, Davis, Kelsey, and drop McKenzie and drop Diggs.
So how do you think you would do it?
So go like this. Do this one. Do Josh Allen. Mm-hmm. Do Josh Allen, Diggs, Kelsey without that, and put in like Eno Benjamin and Stevenson, Carolina. We'll leave the 3 spots.
Eno, Walker. Oh, Stevenson, you said.
Stevenson.
And Carolina.
Start with Diggs, Kelsey, Carolina, and tell us what we have left.
4,200 left per player for receiver, flex.
Possible. Now, more possible. Now, drop Diggs to Davis because Davis just smashed. Davis beat Diggs just last week. People can go back to it.
4,800
Yeah,
per
see,
player.
this is where these are the common builds, right? It's going to be Allen with a receiver, with Kelsey, with the cheap running backs in Benjamin or Walker, with Stevenson, with a cheap D. You can definitely have 4,800 average for 3 spots. Find another way to get there. And you don't have to fill it all out, but the point being, there's definitely ways to get there.
Oh, we can get there. Let's try to figure this out right now. Let's see if we can build the lineup that everyone has without explicitly saying
probably. How much is Etienne this week?
He's too expensive. He's like 5,000, I think. I think we have to look at receivers here to find like the cheap receiver. Because Rondale Moore continues to be that guy. He's a part of that game. We already have Eno in.
Yeah.
But we could get rid of... And we can keep Eno and use... People are not afraid to use both like Rondale Moore and Eno Benjamin.
Then they shouldn't be. That's one that you could do. So plug in Moore. I just will say this, though, because that becomes somewhat unconventional, even though I don't think it is. I have all kinds of lineups that have two guys from the same side without the quarterback, especially when they're that cheap. It makes perfect sense. We saw it last week with Fournette, Godwin, and Otton. Again, it's a little bit much, but Otton at 25 made it work. But point being, Pat, I think what we're seeing in this build, even when we build it, someone looks at that and says, well, if I'm already doing this, why don't I just switch to Geno?
Yeah.
Because he's so much cheaper and he allows me to do so much. And then you can get Diggs. Oh, now I can go up from Davis to Diggs, and I can get Diggs and Kelsey and so on and so forth. So I do think that becomes a little more prevalent as the week goes on. But keep going. More makes sense in there. What are we left with now? Because that was less than our average.
It was. So we have 5,100 per player for a receiver and a flex.
And then so it's like Amari Cooper as the secondary stack with Stevenson at 5,900. And
Yeah.
it'll leave us money that you can buy someone for 4,000 something.
Let's see. Throw in Cooper. Oh, that's Cooper Cup. That's too expensive.
Not getting there.
4,400 for a flex. That puts us in the range of, let's start at 4,400 and go backwards. Randall Cobb, Russell Gage, Alec Pierce, who I think people will like this week.
Hey, Pierce, there it is. Doolin out for the season now, so
Kyle Pitts, $4,200. Zay Jones, $4,200.
yeah. This is the lineup with Davis in it, right? Not Diggs.
Yes.
Yeah, Diggs is a bit much. So yeah, I think this is something you see that you could have people go to where they're trying to get into this spot here. But like I said, you can swap it around a little bit and change it up to make it different.
Yeah, and you can even get rid of Cooper if you. I mean, I know maybe double tight end might not be the way, but Njoku is essentially a receiver. He's $4,000. You put him with Stevenson, and you still have a wide receiver spot for $6,300 if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And now you can get to Waddle or Godwin or Lazard instead of Cooper.
Godwin's super popular. You get a piece of that Brady game.
Yeah.
You know,
still have 200 left over if you do that. You can upgrade your defense if you wanted to.
Right.
I don't like the Panthers for what it's worth.
Yeah, we'll talk more on it later. I'm saying I know people do because the thing is, the storyline is right now, again, they're the cheapest D on the slate. I know Pittsburgh's there, but Pittsburgh literally has nobody to get after. Brady might have all day to throw the ball.
Here's the thing. Carolina also doesn't have anyone to get to Matt Stafford.
It doesn't matter because anybody who in the world, you might be. I mean, Tim, we get Andercus on the show. This might be a spot to finally get somewhere in football. I think anybody could get to Stafford right now with that line.
Arizona couldn't.
Yeah, they could, but they just didn't do enough to score.
They still barely got to Stafford.
Yeah, I think otherwise. I think Carolina definitely can get to him.
All right.
$2,400. Again, I don't care. Like there's a bunch of other Ds I have here that I'm gonna play instead. But I'm saying I think when you look at what people are doing to make the build we just talked about fit, they're willing to go down there and just take their shot. And when you don't have Stafford, Kupp, all of that, we talk about this all the time. Even if you don't like it or don't think that it makes sense, you are also saying that Cooper Kupp doesn't make sense. You're saying Higbee doesn't make sense. And by the way, last week, lots of winning lineups had Dallas D versus Higbee in the same lineup. Higbee still did enough. Dallas D smashed.
Yeah, because you have to think about the way that both Kupp and Higbee, weirdly enough, can get there independent of Stafford because they can both go like 10 for 120 and no touchdowns.
Often
and they're there
this season, yeah. And that wasn't a comparison by any means of Dallas to Carolina. Not even close. Different end of the spectrum. My point was more about when people aren't playing someone from a side, the defense can be in their mind as someone they'll use against them. Like, well, if I'm already not playing any Rams, why not just play this D, hope that they can get to them like Dallas did last week? Like you said, probably not, but I can see that's why people will go there for $2,400.
If we take the KC side, you got Mahomes and Kelsey. I can't imagine anyone using Mahomes. I mean, I can because you're going to play 150 lineups. Not every Mahomes is going to have Kelsey.
But he'll be way lower. Mahomes will be way lower owned than Allen.
I agree.
So it's $200 more or whatever.
But I just don't see how if Patrick Mahomes is going to try to win you $1 million or a big GPP, how you can do that independent of Kelsey in this game. I just don't see how it happens.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm with you, and I think people are, just as comfortable to triple stack it because MVS or Hardman plugs in pretty easily.
Hardman sucks
on that. He's
They're
not
all the rest of these guys are terrible.
Yeah, I think MVS has shown at least a little bit last week, so that'll stay fresh in people's mind.
Yeah, that's good. So that means he can have another good week in 6 weeks.
Probably. Yeah, like he's never been a guy just to go off or anything, but it's just the other thing is like we talked about how bad Juju is. Somebody has to get opportunities because of that. So it ends up becoming where you can just pick one of those guys. But like I said, I think you could also just go Mahomes, Kelsey,
Diggs,
pick a Buffalo guy. Exactly.
Do you prefer Diggs or Davis? I mean, Davis is the one who killed them last year.
Yeah, I probably Diggs at 8,400 and just pay up. But for that game, I'm gonna have it multiple ways. So I'm thinking through it. I actually like McKenzie at 5K, hoping that he comes in with late news and ends up playing. So I like that. But Singletary, another guy. I'm looking for the sort of more off the board ways to get after it. If Davis becomes super popular off of last week and Diggs, because he's expensive and didn't have a good week last week, is up there, look at his other weeks. He still had.
I like that not good week for Diggs is like 100 yards and a touchdown.
Of course. Yeah, that's what same as it always is. What was the week before when he had like 11 or 14 targets? I can't remember, and only got 18 points. Like a horrible week. But that's what I'm saying. I think that's how people lean.
Mahomes, Diggs, Kelsey leaves you with 4,300 per player.
Yeah, it's not good. Similar to what we talked about it's the same flip of the build. It was only $200 difference.
Sure. But
you could just flip to Kelsey and get flip to Mahomes and get $200 more in the Davis build that we had up earlier.
So with Davis instead of Diggs, we do have 4,600 per play. That's still not great.
Yeah, it's the build.
Especially if everyone is doing it at the same time. Because like you mentioned, once you start building this way, who you have to fill in at running back and receiver is going to be the same for everybody. There's only so many guys who are decent and $4,100.
Yeah. The build you had up earlier would have been, you would have got $200 more in your tank when you went from the same build you had on paper, if everyone wrote it down earlier or started filling it in, swap Allen to Mahomes because you're just going the other side with it. But then you may want to take a chance on somebody and say, okay, instead of Godwin there, let me put MVS. And now my flex opens up to a lot more money because he's less money than Godwin, and you get a stack that's a 3-1 conventional like stack. Maybe that gives you the money to get to Diggs, and you're comfortable with a cheaper flex. Flex, obviously, like you said, you can put a cheaper tight end if you want to go double tight end. I don't like that, but I'm just saying people would be more comfortable with that, so I could see that as another angle that people would take.
Suppose we should talk about Seattle and Arizona.
Yep.
With Geno Picks being the man here, $5,700.
He has to be one of the worst leverage besides Stevenson on your sheet right now.
Let's see. Metcalf, Lockett. I think that entire game is essentially negative leverage.
Yeah.
But
Geno is too cheap. Like he's 57.
Yeah,
Why is he that price in this spot, in this game, in this
couldn't
matchup?
tell you.
Makes no sense.
Let's see. From that game, Benjamin is actually the one who appears most optimally because of his price.
And I would think, though, that Run the Sims is amazing. As you always talk about, it's going to update even further, but I think the ownership projection is going to go higher than what it might have now.
It has 22% right now.
Okay, so that's why they're amazing. They're already up to date on it. So that is interesting then. I was going to say the reason is because it sort of just became news yesterday that this sort of forced him up the board on a lot of sites with projections and things like that. So I thought maybe if he was coming in higher, but if they already have him at 22 and still positive leverage, I actually think
he's massive negative leverage.
Oh, he is already. Yeah, okay,
yeah.
That's what I was like. I think this is going to change because I can't imagine it. But yeah, at 22, you can't imagine that it's going to be optimal that often. So but I mean that to me is that's like looking at him as his own entity, one spot,
not
versus
pairing him.
You can still use him, and it's not you can play the chalk with other guys.
Sure, but a lot of people, if they're not playing this game, he's the guy that they're taking out of this game because he's $4,600.
Sure. Oh, I agree there.
And when you put him with all the bill, you should just make a rule that if you're stacking up the Bills game and the Chiefs game, don't use Benjamin because at least you'll just have anyone who plays a Allen stack or Mahomes stack. How many of those lineups do you think that have, percentage of lineups have also Benjamin?
I wouldn't know
80%,
but it's a high number. We just did the build to show. That would be a great point, right? You could just set it up if you're using an optimizer to say like Josh Allen, Benjamin at most one, and then when you get Josh Allen, you're not getting and you can still get some in these other builds that make more sense. Like again, that's where it will work. That's the whole point of what we talked about earlier with late swap. If you've got Burrow, Chase, Hurst, and let's say Olave plays, or you use Kamara, and that goes off for you in the morning, you can play you probably should.
Yeah, you switch to Walker, switch to
he's
Benjamin.
Good. He's good, though, I'm saying at that point. If you got there with all the stuff that nobody's on, and you don't have to stress as much, again, you probably still have to stress for this Buffalo-Kansas City game, but if you don't have to stress as much, at least then you can say, okay, now I'm comfortable putting in, because not only do these people need to go off, they need Buffalo and Kansas City to beat my morning stack where Jamar Chase went for 3 touchdowns, Hurst got 1, that means Burrow had 4, and then Olave crushed on the other side coming back from concussion. You're ahead of the game there, so you can play the better projected play, and it's not as much negative leverage when you're piling it in to that. It's negative leverage on his own, but my point being, you could fit him into those stacks to make it make more sense.
The most this is going to be, it's not a direct correlation with ownership percentage every single time, but when guys get out of control higher on, that doesn't mean don't play them. If you think they're going to be amazing, play them and figure it out a different way. The most negative leverage players this week, Ramondre is number 1 because we have him projected 38%.
I think that's right.
But he is the most optimal player on the slate, too. Like, he appears in an optimal lineup more than 1 in 5 times, which is pretty crazy. It's a great price. It's a great matchup. I see it. I'm probably not going to use a ton of Stevens.
But that's the key that you just said, because I tried to state it or reiterate it now. But like what you just said is that even though this is true, it's negative leverage 1-to-1 on Ramondre, saying because of this ownership, because he's only optimal this amount, that technically makes him so he's not a good play. But we've seen it every week so far this season. And I know this is getting a little bit out of hand because the bye weeks add to the ownership and all that factors. But there is still ways to use him, and he is still the most optimal guy on the slate. Like, there's a reason he is that high owned. What we're trying to say and explain is that that's why you don't want to just plug him in to all the same lineups everyone else has him in. If you've got, back to what I just talked about earlier, that Cincinnati stack with Ramondre,
you're good.
You're much better off on paper going in from a leverage perspective or from the slate perspective of using him in a spot that others aren't than when you're saying, yes, Ramondre went off, and now I got that big Buffalo game in the afternoon. That's what you're going to have in cash games and what you like because it makes the most sense on paper. We could have a week like last week where it works again. But I'm just saying that's what we're talking about when we're trying to explain it up front, how you can use them in a different way.
I've seen too many articles this week about the chalk hitting, that we're due for one of these weeks where it's like, oh my God, the millionaire winning lineup had Zach Wilson as the quarterback. It's one of those. It really feels like one of those weeks. Or it's the week where Jonathan Taylor goes off, who, by the way, we'll get to this in a second, is the most positive leverage play on the slate. Cheapest he's been in
Price
ages.
Is down, yeah, exactly.
We don't even know if he's playing at this point, mind you. But
going against Jacksonville,
yeah. But no one's using him.
No, definitely not. We said, like, even the lineup constructions don't really allow for it. So, you look at it, anything could allow for it, you can make it work. I'm saying that when we built out what we suspect many others are doing, but then this goes back to it. So same thing in a different way. We just talked about the Buffalo stacks and that big game with the Eno Benjamins, and we also talked about with Ramondre Stevenson, Ramondre everywhere. But when you go Geno stacks, now people have the money and find this, and go to Jonathan Taylor, that's where you'll see him being used more. Even though it won't be as much, it's the opposite example of what I just gave. He'll still be lower owned, but people are going to be using him in stacks that fit him. And what stacks fit him? The most popular is the Geno stack.
Sure, but I would guess that if there is $8,000-ish laying around as a part of a Geno stack, those are going to Justin Jefferson. Or if people can get up to Kupp, they're going to do that. Like Jonathan Taylor's not on the tip of anyone's tongue.
For sure, that's not the same. The math tells it out. If Jonathan Taylor stays at 8%, like he probably will,
he'll be more associated with those
that
players.
Percentage will be in stacked lineups with Geno Smith. Again, doesn't make it good. It makes it fine because he's low owned in a spot. But I'm saying the Geno stacks may still be the bad idea there.
So the most negative leverage plays on this slate. Ramondre number 1. Lockett, Walker, Eno Benjamin, DK Metcalf are next.
Yeah, that whole game.
Yeah. But is that a product of maybe the projections just aren't hip to Seattle having the best offense in the league?
I think it's a product of the pricing is just bad on all those guys, and the ownership is the only reason that they're showing. They're still showing.
No, they all show they're
all solid optimal plays.
So that's just pure leverage that I'm talking about here. Just basically how often do they appear in the optimal versus their ownership percentage. Now, if we just take a look at who are the most optimal players on this slate you got Stevenson, Jonathan Taylor, and Cooper Kupp. That shouldn't be surprising. Taylor and Kupp have the highest upsides, along with McCaffrey.
Where do those guys you mentioned as the worst negative leverage?
Eno Benjamin is number 7 in terms of best play. Like I said, Ramondre is number 1. Lockett is number 13. Rondell Moore is number 14.
Right.
Kenneth Walker is number 16.
So back to what we were explaining to everyone so they follow, because not everybody knows this stuff.
That's
why
I want to talk this out.
It's a great conversation to have because that's exactly it. The reason they're negative leverage is because they're priced so poorly that the general public recognizes that and the projections recognize that and says, you should go play these guys. They're awesome. And we had this 2 weeks ago when it was Seattle and Detroit. Seattle continues to be involved in this because they continue, as we talked on the show, to not change their prices. Geno, way too cheap. Lockett, way too cheap. Now we get some fill-in just by pure luck with the spot of like Eno Benjamin on the James Conner injury. Rondale Moore refused to get priced up, even though he hasn't went off and crushed. The point being, that's what's doing it. So maybe it's a spot pad again, and I know people will do this in some cases, but to overstack and get different there. Maybe it's finally a spot to use Kyler, because if Mahomes is coming in less than Allen, and we know Geno is the popular cheap guy, Kyler is also getting squeezed, and we have ways to stack him up here now against one of the worst defenses in football.
Kyler is most definitely, I think, the way to play this game.
Yeah.
just even looking at the ownership percentages right off the hop, he's like 1/3 what Geno is. Now, Geno's way cheaper, but how do we overstack it?
Kyler, Marquise Brown, and then pick one of Moore and Ertz, and don't play Benjamin.
I want Ertz. Here's the thing about Rondell Moore. Kind of
sucks. I know.
Sucks.
That's why I'm saying his price didn't change.
You need
probably most valid.
You need 8.2 DraftKings points off 17 targets. Rondell Moore is your guy.
Gosh, yeah. It's so bad, man. It's like one of the guys that we play in golf where they'll just make the cut and get you the top 40, but you're like, I need upside.
Yeah.
He doesn't have it. But again, can you play Kyler Murray with Eno Benjamin? Probably. No problem. I'm saying, but if you wanted to really leverage the spot, we know how popular Benjamin's going to get.
Lockett or Metcalf?
Metcalf.
Okay.
I think it's the same as last season. I know it's continued to work out in Lockett's favor a little bit.
I've been playing a ton of Lockett every week.
It works. I get it. It has. I'm just saying the same as last season. I'll continue to ride with Metcalf.
So how popular do you think this build will be? You still have $4,600 left over before we put into defense, too. This is why people are going to, and this is the Kyler side, not the Geno side. Kyler, Ken Walker, Hollywood Brown, DK Metcalf, Zach Ertz. $4,600 per player left. Throw in Carolina D.
Yeah.
As the example, $5,300 per player for a running back, a receiver, and a flex.
Yeah, and you 5-manned it. So the point I was going to make is if you just take out somebody, don't take out, leave Walker. Who did you say you had at wide receiver?
Metcalf.
With who else?
Hollywood.
And?
Ertz.
Okay. Take out Metcalf.
Okay. $5,700.
And leave Carolina. Okay. So, okay, take out Walker, put Lockett. This is a good exercise, I think, because we're trying to get to what we did last week. I love this exercise because we actually found out like what was similar. So when you went Lockett, who's popular?
Yeah, so we're still at $5,700 per player now.
So
for two running backs, a receiver, and a flex.
Yeah, this is what makes it interesting because we are getting similar setup to what the Kansas City Buffalo stack was, but we end up with almost $1,000 more per player. So you see what I'm saying? Where this is like, again, negative leverage on paper, but I can tell you right now, it's not negative leverage to have Kyler with Marquise Brown with, okay, now Ertz is the negative leverage and Lockett's the negative leverage.
It's funny because those two guys are still positive leverage because Marquise Brown and Kyler are like the two players in this game, right. I guess because they're too expensive that no one wants to use.
But that's what I'm saying. When you take it in as a whole, that's where people are getting that. It's even like last week. I'll keep harping on this because I talked about it on the Monday review show that RPS does. Like, the cash lineups all won. This was such a shitty lineup. Like, it's so terrible. No. Like, people were not playing Davis in some of them. I mean, not just a Million Maker. Like, that's a different story. But in some of the biggest tournaments that were won by some of the sharpest players in the world, it was like they just found a way to make it all work where once you put the McKenzie news out there, you get Davis and Shakir in some of these builds that made it work. It was Davis, Shakir with a Pickens, and then it allowed you just to fit all the chalk and put up 230 points. That is not a bad lineup. That just, they took what was already great plays and found a way to use them very differently. It allowed them to open things up in the rest of their build. So I never have a problem with that. And I think that's what we're finding here in this Arizona-Seattle game. Plays look bad on their standalone spots, and we know they're popular, but they're popular for a reason. It's bad pricing. The spot still looks good. Could it fail? Absolutely. But if you're going to use it and go there, and especially if you have to late swap, Pat, again, this would be the whole point about late swap we talked about earlier, tangent now, but Buffalo, Kansas City ain't getting you nowhere. All those guys are going to have ownership one way, shape, or another. But Kyler, Marquise Brown, guys like that are just not. Metcalf, less than Lockett. Like, there is spots in this game that you can get to that others aren't going to be going to or are not going to be as popular at still fair prices, cheaper prices.
Metcalf coming in at 15, Lockett at 21%, Hollywood Brown 5%.
Which is insane when you look at what he's been doing.
Yeah, he's the one guy who does stuff.
He gets such a bad rap, but I mean, like, that was with Lamar. Man, like Lamar and the Ravens don't throw the ball. They don't.
And he had a shit start this year. He had 2 bad weeks to start. Now he gets 40 targets a game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have it in front of me. I think his whole year's still okay. Like, if you
no, it is, but just the first 2 weeks weren't good.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact stats, but I mean, looking at those 2 weeks, I thought there was still something there. And my point being, though, trending upwards, always looks good, never gets priced. Again, back to pricing. He should be considered a bad price, but he's not because he's not the $4,100 or $4,200, should say more. He's not the $5,600 Lockett, but he's been doing just as much or more and a lot more than Rondell Moore, of course, and that's why he's priced up.
If you did save some money or tried to figure out a way to make it work, if you had to get off of Kenneth Walker and you had like good pieces that went off early, you wanted to keep the Kyler stack because you know it's somewhat contrarian, but you don't feel like you have enough, if you really want to take that risk, it's a bit more difficult to get up to. But if you can get up to Clyde Edwards-Helaire instead of, like, if that's the late swap that you wanted to make,
for sure,
like, that one makes sense. If that's a piece of that Bills game that you wanted to swap onto because just no one's going to use it.
And
now you need to get
and
real
what we talked
lucky.
about earlier, like you could build that going in though. It doesn't even have to just be a late swap. The point is, if you're already going heavy on the Seattle-Arizona game, you think there's going to be no points in this other game? Like you better still be adding in Buffalo-Kansas City pieces. But to your point, a way to do it differently would be that, right? You're like even for an example, if you have Walker and Lockett in the same lineup, when you go from Walker up to CEH, like you talked about, and then you take Lockett up to Metcalf, you just have to come down one other spot, and you can make that work, and you have guys that aren't as popular in that game, and you're getting a different piece in your Seattle game. So you can do it still and be different and not even have to worry about late swapping to it and just go in differently because you're saying I'm stacking Seattle, Arizona, means you're saying that's going to beat out, at least from a point per dollar, DraftKings points overall scoring perspective to win a tournament, you're saying it's going to outdo Buffalo, Kansas City.
So I think I found my main stack of the week. It's going to be Kyler, Walker, Benjamin, Hollywood Brown, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Zach Ertz in the same lineup.
All of them.
Seven-man stack.
I like it.
Better hope for 100 points and just hope like it's that Detroit game.
It can happen. We just saw it in Seattle-Detroit. It just happened.
I'm trying to think of how often that something like that actually happens. Where I remember there was the Giants-Saints game one year where it was like Beckham, Eli, and I think it was Marcus Colston. And I think there was like 104 points in that game. It was like, oh my God. Like if you didn't have that game, you were toast.
These games have been getting, what was it, 48-45, Seattle-Detroit? You can see the points stack up here, man. It's definitely possible. Like it just depends if you have the right pieces and the right guys. Maybe that's too much of an overstack.
Well, now I can't miss.
Well, you got
watch
everyone.
Rondell Moore go off.
But then you're going to mess up your last two spots.
Well, I just won't use Carolina's D. I'll be good.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, what else can we get to here? Defenses? Like I like Jacksonville. Just play Jacksonville D. Play defenses against Matt Ryan. Good things happen. The end.
Yeah, I have them on the list for sure. With Matt Ryan exclamation point is the note that I put. So
how do Bills and Chiefs D work as a part of this game?
They can definitely work. That's another way to get unique with it. You know, if you played the D, again, you're going to have defense against position, which you usually love to do.
I do. I was thinking. Like,
I was going to say,
if I use Josh Allen, it's like obviously it's a very low outcome percentage. But as a part of a stack, use Chiefs D. Hopefully, like Chiefs D can like pick him off for 6, keep Allen throwing, keep Mahomes off the field, and all of a sudden the Chiefs scoring is done that way. That's a really low outcome. It's about as low as, I guess it's not as low as Clyde Edwards-Helaire going off in this game, but
right,
it's the same sort of premise.
I think defenses, even if the game gets a little bit higher scoring, we've seen it work out where the defenses are still part of that and creating the tempo, the pace, everything that makes it move. But then you're kind of looking at it from the other angle. Like, for example, you gave earlier, and I said I agree with you. If Buffalo smashes and wins by 20, you could have like Singletary with the Buffalo D. And they could just keep putting Singletary in. The reason Singletary might have a huge game is they keep putting him in position, or vice versa. CEH, if you think Kansas City gets there, CEH and Kansas City D, and have that set up where it's like they keep putting him in position to score. And it's just, Allen finally has a bad game. The chalk busts. Like you said, he'd be the biggest spot to leverage on the slate. Anything to do with going against Buffalo on this slate is going to be huge because of where Josh Allen sits in the quarterback ownership, which then leads to the stack ownership and so on and so forth.
Trying to figure out which team is going to throw the most this week.
So I had a couple others here. So I had, who do I got? Baltimore versus the Giants. Daniel Jones, bad receivers. Barkley was banged up. Again, he's going to come in okay, but the point being they make mistakes.
Dolphins D against Cousins. I know we like Cousins, but he's going to throw.
We always like that. Cincy against Dalton, especially if they're still down guys. I could see that, and since he's actually been putting a little bit more pressure than most know or think lately. Atlanta against San Francisco. Again, Jimmy G doesn't really give you the chance, but I know they're the $100 pivot to people that are playing Carolina down at the bottom, so I looked at that. They actually have been getting pressure. How do you think they've been covering those games? Atlanta D has actually stepped up in these spots to put them in the position to be able to cover those games. So
it's funny. They play like absolute garbage until like the last 5 minutes, their defense. And then all of a sudden they start generating pressure out of nowhere.
Yeah. So they have the ability. It's just they haven't, I don't think they broke a slate or anything like that, but just thinking from that perspective. And then Tampa Bay against Pickett.
That's $3,900.
If you're going up. Yeah. Again, a lot of people won't have the money because of the stacks that they're playing. But that makes it interesting as well. Like you said, if something busts on this slate, from like your point of if we get one of the slates that finally completely busts, it's very likely to be the Josh Allen side of things. He's the most popular. on the slate. I'm playing a bunch of them. I'm just saying that's why I never go all in on a guy, because if it doesn't come through, I think that's the most likely spot. I think we end up seeing a game where the running backs are more involved. They both want to keep the other quarterback off the field, right? Both sides should want to keep the other quarterback off the field. Just they haven't been able to in the past, and it's the rematch from last year, and it's got to be that score because that's what's going to happen again, right? It has to. That's the scenario that it definitely could go the other way.
So Jags D is objectively my favorite defensive play here.
I like them.
Bucks, if you can get up to them, I do like a lot as well. That's going to be very difficult. Of Bills, Chiefs, Seahawks, and Cardinals, because we can talk about like the Bills and Chiefs all we want. Maybe they're not great plays, but Cardinals are still going against Geno Smith. And if Geno just kind of turns back into Geno a little bit.
Yeah, he'd have to. I'd take it the other way for sure.
You'd take
Kyler.
Seattle?
Yeah.
They're cheaper. And
I just like going against Kyler. I mean, he takes sacks on his own. Like he pretty much gives you all the options, and he wasn't him. It was actually Tua that said this. I can't see over all the guys, but Kyler could have said that too. He's also not very tall.
How do you feel about the Vikings at 34?
No, I think I would find the money to get up to Tampa.
Okay.
500. I mean, 3,900 is expensive for a D, but when you're going against Pickett and they have nobody, like they just don't have anything, man. Like he's gonna chuck. They have nothing to lose. Someone was talking about this today too. I forget who it was. I apologize, but I just remember it was a good point they made that like Pittsburgh's just going to see what I think there's like a stat with Tomlin. I think he's never had a losing season, right? Is
correct?
Now he's going to have a losing season.
You wait for Pickett.
No, he's going to have a losing season. I don't need to be. That's not some hot take. That's an obvious factor, I think. But why wouldn't they see out? Like to me, they're not going to tank. Like there's nothing. They have Pickett. They want to see what this guy has. So why not let him air it out? You and I love this. When a team has a quarterback, it's not a backup third string that let's find how to make it easy for this guy. They're going to try, but they also want to see what he has, and they're going to let him take chances. So we want that. And when you got a defense like Tampa Bay going against that, I think it's something worth looking for. And at 3,900, again, a lot of people just can't get there. So I don't hate it at all.
I only have 4 quarterbacks projected for a pick or more this week: Pickett, Ryan, Dalton, and PJ Walker.
Yeah, Rams are 4,100.
Yeah, that's too much.
And also that one is another spot where, again, this is to me, and you're the best at picking this out, I think, but like when you get a guy like Walker coming in, that's to me is not the same as Pickett coming in. Like they don't want to see what he has. He says he's going to get the hands in the play get the ball in the hands of his playmakers. I think you could just see some of these shorter. But this is why I don't like DJ Moore. I think it's more of like a prop play. If you wanted to bet on DJ Moore props this week, I think he'd get the receptions and the yards because I think they're going to find easy passes to him. But I don't think PJ Walker is going to come in slinging it, airing it out, fumbling it, and doing all this stuff for a $4,100 Rams D to get there. I'd rather, again, still play the Bucks at $200 less to get after Pickett. But we talked about Jacksonville versus Indy, and I talked about Cincy versus Dalton. So to make your point, I think those 4 Ds are good, but I prefer the bottom 3 versus the Rams up top.
The medium projection for Kenny Pickett right now is 34 pass attempts. Like, that's fantastic. Give me 34 or a bit more against that Tampa
34 Picketts is like maybe 50. Like we're getting really good, juicy opportunities. So that's a lot of opportunities to pick it off.
So let's try to come to some sort of conclusion here, because I think your tight ends are going to end up being whoever is a part of your stack.
The ownership already bears it out anyway, too. Like I said, with Kelsey, with Ertz.
Like, do you have any one-off tight ends that you like? Like that you think, like,
my list
if Braid is out, I like Kate Otten.
Yeah, I don't. I think we saw it last week. He does not. He doesn't give you anything. He gets you nothing.
No, but he's what, $2,900? Like, if you needed to jam something in.
Yeah, I would still, like you mentioned Hurst earlier, I would still jam that, especially if Higgins is out, where I would jam him, and you could secondary stack or not. Last week, an example is Njoku, and he's fine on this slate as well. But Njoku last week was, who did Cleveland play again? Was it Chargers?
Chargers, yeah.
Right? And so it actually worked out. There were some really nice looking lineups if you had Eckler and Njoku, and everyone's, that's results oriented. No, I'm saying even if you went in before the slate and looked, Eckler, people liked that game. They just didn't know how to use the pieces. People were playing Njoku some. It would have made sense if you found that secondary. I think here you could find like a Hurst Kamara or Olave. We'll wait on the news of who's playing and whatnot. My point being, though, is that you can find something like that without having to go too far off the board and still mix in a secondary if you wanted. I don't see a lot else. I like Irv Smith, but again, that's going to be in cousin stacks.
Yeah.
So I like the Disley call you had earlier. If you want to play someone that's different, that's cheap, that's in that Arizona-Seattle game as a way to get different when most are on Ertz. Last, the only one-off I would ask about or say is we talked a little bit on him earlier, but Kittle. If we do see Atlanta covering again here and we do see a closer game, Kittle started out last week. He had 4 catches for 43 and a fumble on the first drive of the week, the starting point of the game, and then they just left him for dead. But if you think that this is a spot here and people are paying up for Kelsey, then the sneaky ones go to Andrews, and then the rest all pay down or fill out their stacks with Ertz and guys below, then could you see Kittle sort of squeeze between Ertz and the high-end guys?
The 5 I have projected over 10% right now, and that's like give or take a few on either side. Pitts, Andrews, Higbee, Ertz, and Kelsey. Everyone else should be relatively unknown.
God, I mean, Pitts,
maybe people galvanize on Hurst if he ends up like clear in health, no Higgins in that game, and that's where you save money. Then sure. And if Freiermuth misses, I could see people playing the Brady stack with Zach Gentry.
Yeah, could see that too.
$2,600.
I think people still are, in tune with Pickens. They like him.
Yeah, that's fine and everything, but like that's to punt away. Like eventually his price becomes like, oh, he's like a real guy now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, something to keep an eye on. And Gentry is just so cheap that it would make sense to fill that out coming back the other way, especially if you didn't want to play Otton, or if Brait was in and it made it a little bit more murky, you'd say, okay, I can just go to Gentry on the other side. So I could see that. Again, these guys won't get popular. Kittle was the only one where I'm sort of riding the middle. Like I said, that might be the way. Remember I was talking earlier about how if San Francisco's a look-ahead spot, early west to east, all these little things where it's like, I don't know. I could see where this game does become a little bit tighter, and Kittle would stand out to me as an option there. It's not all the way coming across the East Coast or anything, but I'm just saying from San Francisco, it's still a little spot here where they're on the road. Could be a look ahead. I think we could see it. And Atlanta has continued to cover, and we are this 5.5 home dog, which has been very good in the past. I think it's over 60% that it hits at.
Well, I should probably start punching in my stack requests into Run the Sims here, where I want my quarterback from Arizona. So I think Kyler, Burrow, and Brady are going to be my 3. If I go to 4, I think I'm just going to go completely off the wall with someone just insane. For a stack.
Brissett.
I was thinking more like Lawrence.
Yeah, one thing we didn't talk a lot about him, but Lawrence failing last week. So here's the thing about Lawrence. It failed last week. It didn't work. Why did we like it at all? Was because it was so easy to stack it up. That game literally, it was against Houston. We had a couple guys on the Houston side.
Pierce.
The main ones on the other sides. In this week, you've got, it's easy. Like it's Lawrence, Kirk, Jones. That didn't change. If you want to mix in Etienne or Ingram, that's on you. I'm just saying the first stuff did not change. The other side is Jonathan Taylor, who, like I said, is projecting well and would be the guy to set it off.
Alec Pierce to save some money and then go back up to like Justin Jefferson
to save the money. You've got, like, again, it's so easy to stack up, but now no one's going there. But this week's there's less games to choose from. The same situation where it's easy to stack. It's one you could get back involved with. So I had it there as well. So
Lawrence, Cousins, it's probably it.
Kyler.
Kyler's like the main one.
Oh, you got it there, yeah.
So Kyler, Burrow, and Brady for sure.
Yeah.
And then if I do want to add a fourth one in as a part of 20 lineups or however many I ended up playing.
Kyler might be more of a late swap guy for me than going in, but definitely Allen. I like the Stafford with Kupp and Higbee.
See, I'm not going to use Allen. I'm not going to use Geno. I'm probably going to fade this Bills game. And I was all over the Bills game last week.
Yeah.
But like even that Baltimore week, I was just like, I'm not going to play it. I'm going to play the stupid Seahawks and Detroit game. That worked out, but I just need to get it right that the game that actually shoots out is the Cardinals one, and it's the Cardinals side that does the condensed fantasy scoring.
Yeah. The one that might be the biggest one for me, actually, and again, just to round out the show, I guess, but like there's no homer bias here, but the Lamar Jackson spot where he's just underneath the two most popular in that game. Andrews is just underneath Kelsey in that. You actually get that little bit of savings. If you wanted to run it back with a guy like, I don't know, like, there's Marcus Johnson, there's Slayton, there's guys that you could use, Barkley, as you mentioned. Whatever you want to do differently there, you could do that and still save just a little bit. But I really do think that's an interesting spot here. Going against the Giants, I think they can smash them. If the Giants can keep up some way, shape, or form, even better, right, for me, for that stack. But I think that's what makes it interesting is that because Andrews is under Kelsey and Lamar is under Mahomes and Allen. I kind of like that one quite a bit.
Stafford I'm going to play around with as well.
I like that one a lot, but I think that's better for smaller fields.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to stack up. You want to correlate more stuff in the smaller fields. You need less to happen to get there. And again, we nailed it last week again with Kupp. Like, again, we knew he was going to put up his 25 or 30 points, but it's not going to do anything for the slate. Like, it's not going to break the slate because he's $9,600 or whatever. It's just too much. But in the smaller fields, those points, you just watch those rack up at the end and no one else has them. And you're like, this is perfect. I found a way to get to him. Shakir last week was a guy that allowed you to make that decision. Like, holy shit, now I can go and get Kupp into my lineup. I don't even love him, but in the smaller field stuff, it just made perfect sense because now I'm going to rack up 25 to 30 points. And if I get more, great. I'm not expecting it, but it makes it work so much better and nobody else has them.
think that's it. Week 6. You'll be in studio on Sunday.
Be here watching football
Live!
and in the studio on Sunday. It's going to be a good day.
Cust will be sitting in between us.
Can't wait.
It's going to be tough. He might get super cursed.
No, it never.
And it's towards the end of the game.
I only just started believing in it.
Hopefully you're winning $1 million. And then he'll say, you're not going to win. And then you'll win.
This could be the week. Imagine. Remember I said, imagine we break the studio curse. When I don't come to the studio, I win money. Imagine I win the most amount I've ever won while being in the studio on Sunday night.
I would enjoy that.
I would too. We would have a great free roll for the people if that happened.
We'd have some sort of fun giveaway.
Yes, we would.
But you have to be watching on Sunday night in order to get into it. How about that?
Definitely. I'll agree to that. Anything 100,000 or more, prize, doesn't have to be profits. If I win 100, that wouldn't be the most I ever won, but the million would be. That's why I said that line. But if I win more than 100,000 Sunday night, say if I win more than 50,000 sitting here Sunday night, we'll have a big free roll for the people.
I like it. So follow Tambo on Twitter at @ToeTagAndTambo. You can catch his tidbits coming out on Saturdays. You can find that in the newsletter as well. You can sub to that down for free down in the comment section. The Listeners League is down there as well. RunTheSims.com/Mayo and RPS25 at RunPureSports.com to get yourself 25% off the first month. Suggest you do it. All right? I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!